this is Mike from hamradioscience.com. Today we're going to take a look at the FDM-Duo and some new software that has been recently released called Duo, which gives you a display for your FDM-Duo. It's a standalone display. It's really more of a remote than anything else, but it is wireless and it connects to your FDM-Duo through a HC05 Bluetooth dongle. Now, right at this point, this is sort of a do-it-yourself project, and we're going to detail that as we go along. But basically, your external display is used standalone. There's no computer required. As long as the dongle is connected to the back of the FDM-Duo, it will work. And it makes it somewhat remote. You can move it around, put it in different places and so forth. But you have the ability to do touch screen tuning. We have a zoom feature here on the tuning, so you can zoom in and see what you're doing. And you can drag and tune along in here. So you kind of get the idea here. Then we can switch back to the wide display. Also, you have some commonly used features over here, like the band that you want to use. You can kind of go through these, and you'll see, if you're looking over here on the left, that our radio will respond. So if I switch to 20 meters, the radio switches to 20 meters. You also have your PTT, which is handy if you are using like a microphone located a little bit away from the radio. You can put this next to it and have access to all the little controls here. And you'll see there's a few more in here, like your noise reduction, noise blanker, and so forth and so on. Okay, so these makes these controls a little handier to get to. So what we're going to do is go through the process of how to make this yourself. Now, it's very possible that Elad will have these kits available for you at some point in time, but if you want to experiment with the software, then you can go ahead and do that. So let's look at that. For this project, there are a couple of things you're going to need to get. One, and probably the most important thing, is a HC05 Bluetooth module. This is the device that's going to allow you to be able to connect your Elad FDM-Duo to your tablet through Bluetooth. These are pretty readily available on Amazon for around $8 to $10. Now, we chose this one mainly because of the little adapter cable that you get, these little jumper cables, which will make things a little easier to set up and so forth. The other thing you'll have to have is a male DB9 connector that will plug into the back of the FDM-Duo. You probably got one of these with your radio. You can use this one, or you can buy another one. They're just a few dollars, and you'll be able to connect the cable from the module to the DB9 connector and plug it into the back of your radio. Now, one thing we're going to have to do is these chips basically come unprogrammed. So we're going to have to program it to the specifications that the Duo software requires. And we're going to do that by connecting it to a Raspberry Pi and program it. Now, hopefully down the road, I understand that Elad may make these readily available, so you really won't have to put them together. So this is definitely a DIY approach to this at this point. So what we're going to do is connect the cables up, and I'll show a diagram of where they should go, and we're going to program the device with the Raspberry Pi. couple things to note about your HC05 once you have it wired up is if you look on the back, this particular chip, the power rating is between 3.6 and 5 volts, which should be fine for the Elad since its power connector on the DB9 is around 5 volts. The other thing to be sure to take a look at is down here, usually at this location, this is your key pin. Now, on various HC05 chips, this may be labeled differently. For example, this one's labeled EN, some might be labeled wake up, and then some are labeled key. Another thing to note, we're going to flip this over. Let me show you something on the front side of this chip. If you look at the front of your HC05 chip, you might notice that if you look very closely, there's a little tiny button right here in the corner. Now, if you have one of these, programming or getting this chip into the programming mode is going to be a little different from the HC05s that do not have this button. So I'll discuss both methods as we go forward, but keep that in mind. Okay, once you have all your jumpers connected between the HC05 chip and the Raspberry Pi, you can power it up. Now, when you power it up, you should see two flashing lights. There's a little blue one, we're not concerned about that one, but the red one we are. So when you powered up your Pi, if it's flashing slowly, it's in the programming mode. If it's flashing fast, it's in the operational mode. So what we want to do is be sure that we get this light flashing in the right direction. So there's a couple of things you can look at here. If you have the HC05 without the button on the back and it comes up flashing rapidly, what you want to do is look at, the jumper where you connected the VCC line. I have mine connected to the orange and my key line is yellow. So what I want to do is just lift the power pin for the VCC and then plug it back in. Okay. Now, that should put it back into the slow flashing mode. However, on this particular HC05, that's not happening because it has a button on it. So let's take a look at how we do the programming with the HC05 that has the button. Now, if your HC05 chip has the button, and you can see on this one, it's right about right there. So this is a little trickier. So what you're going to have to do is, while it's still on, is grab a hold of it and try to press this button down with something and hold it. It's not always easy. And then we're going to disconnect the VCC line, okay? And then we're going to plug it back in and then let off the button. If everything worked correctly, you'll see that now the light is flashing a lot more slowly here. Okay, see if we can see that a little better. So that's the rate you should see the HC05 chip flashing if it's ready to be programmed. Now, once we have this done, we can then move to the Raspberry Pi, and let's talk about how we actually program the chip. There's a couple of changes we have to make for it to work with the FDM-Duo software. Another quick thing here is that there will be notes on the Ham Radio Science page as to exactly what chip we're using if you wanted to follow this a little more closer. Once you have your Raspberry Pi ready to go, what we're going to do is, first of all, open a terminal window. So we're going to have to go through several steps to get the Pi ready to program the HC05 chip. So I'm going to stop here and zoom in on the terminal windows, so hopefully you can see what I'm typing a little bit easier. Okay, once you're in the Raspberry Pi's terminal window, the first thing we're going to have to do is go in and turn off the serial communications to the console. If you don't do this, you're going to have trouble getting the rest of the steps to work. So we're going to turn it off for now, but if you want to, you can re-enable it later once you're done programming your HC05. So what we're going to do is go to the configuration menu by typing sudo RASPI config, and then enter that. Okay, that brings up the configuration tool, and what we want to do is go down to option number 8, advanced options, then go down to A8 serial, and what we'd like to do is disable the serial port from the shell. So we're going to say we don't want that on, and so we can say OK, and then we can go down and get out of this and be ready to go on to the next step. The next step is that we're going to have to establish communications with the HC05 module, and there's several ways to do this. Now I just prefer a TTY interface that has a graphical user interface, so I'm going to download a little program called QtCom. So let's do that. We'll say sudo apt-get install QtCom. Okay. Okay. Now all we got to do is start the program by saying sudo QtCom, and then our program starts. Okay. All right. Now what I'm going to do is stop, and we'll zoom in on the QtCom program so you can see what we're doing here a little better. Now when you first start QtCom, we're going to have to do a couple things to configure it to communicate with the HC05 module. So what we need to do is, first of all, if you'll look up at the top, when you first start this program, you might notice that you have this dev/ttyso. Well, we actually need to have a little different name here. There are some others available, but you're probably not going to find the one that we need. So what you can do is type it in just by typing in AMA0. Whoops, 0. Okay. Once you have it, once you do this one time, it'll stay in your listing of devices to use. The second thing you want to take a look at is the baud rate. Now these HC05 chips typically will communicate at 9600 or 38400 out of the box. So there may be a little trial and error involved depending on your chip. So I happen to know that this one I'm using is set to 38400 out of the box. So I can change that. I don't have to change this or any of this over here. Now down at the bottom, this you won't see. This I've been kind of messing about with a little bit, so there's a little extra stuff here. But you do need to change this setting to carriage return line feed end. Okay. Now if you want to test it out, what you want to do is say open device. If there are no errors or anything happens here, then everything's good. What you can do is enter a command. I've already typed this one previously, but it's AT plus version ? Which will return the version of the chip. Now this down here is your input area, so this is where you're going to be entering your commands. Okay, so when I enter this, I get back a response from the chip showing the version number. Now I've done this a few times, and sometimes you'll get an error message that comes back, but you can ignore it and just try it again. So what we're going to need to do is change a couple parameters in the HC05 to work with the BlueDuo software. And one is a different baud rate, and the other is a different name for the HC05. The HC05s typically come out of the box identifying themselves as HC05 as their name. Well, we're going to have to change that to Blue Duo. Let's go ahead and change the name of the chip. Probably should have mentioned that all this has to be done in uppercase. But the command to change the name of the chip is AT plus name equals, and the chip name has to be Blue Duo. Okay, so once we have that in, we'll go ahead and enter that. And it tells us up here, OK. So now the name of the chip has been changed. Next thing we're going to do is change the baud rate. The baud rate that's required by the Blue Duo software is 115/200. So I've already entered the command here for you in the input line, which is AT plus UART equals 115/200, 00. Now these set some other settings that we're not going to really need here, so we have to set these to say 0. So if this all works out well, I should be able to enter it. And it says OK, so we're good to go. One optional setting that I highly recommend that you go ahead and do is changing the pin number for your HC05 chip. Problem with these HC05 chips, a lot of them don't come with much documentation, and typically the default pins for a lot of Bluetooth devices is 1, 2, 3, 4 or 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, my HC05 just didn't respond to either one of those codes, so I'm just going to go ahead and set my own here so that I can pair it with my Android device. And the command to do that is AT plus PSWD equals 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever you want it, the 4-digit code to be. So let's go ahead and do that. This should complete the HC05 programming phase of this project. So what I'm going to do is, before I disconnect everything from the Raspberry Pi and everything, is go grab an Android device and see if the Blue Duo chip is being seen before I disconnect all my wires and so forth and start on the next phase. So let's go do that. I'm now going to my Bluetooth device to test and see if the HC05 will pair with it correctly. Now, your menus on your Android device might look slightly different, but when you want to go into the settings menu and pick Bluetooth and see if your device discovers the HC05, which this one does, and we named it Blue Duo, so here it is. Now, eventually it's going to ask me for the pairing key, so I set mine to 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's see if we can get that in there. Okay. And then it paired right away, and it tells me at the top it's paired. So it should be good to go. So now we can kind of move on to the next step. Now we need to wire the HC05 to the DB9 connector using the chart of the connections that we need to make. And there's only 4. What I plan to do is to just cut off the ends of the jumper cable that was provided with the HC05 and use that to connect to the DB9 connector. Now I'll also, you see there's still an exposed pin here. I'm just going to take one of these ends and kind of cap it off. The other thing you would need to notice is that the HC05 has a little plastic wrapper that covers up most of the connections except for these down here. So probably a little piece of tape would suffice. Also, if you're going to cut off the connectors, you may not want to cut them really short, because if you have a problem with your programming, you may want to be able to splice this back together. And we only need 4 of these wires. So I'm going to go do that now, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, we've finished connecting the DB9 connector to the Bluetooth module. So you see I have a little blue tape around the connectors there to protect the exposed solder points on the back of the board. I'll probably do something a little better with that down the road. I'm not too worried about the wire up top. I believe that is the Bluetooth antenna. So we're ready to kind of move on to the next step, which is downloading and upgrading the firmware for the FDM-Duo. Okay, now once we've got all the hardware wired up and plugged in, there is one piece of software you're going to have to get, and that is the APK file that is the Android application that you're going to be using. So what you want to do is head on over to the Elad download page and look under the Linux directory, and this is the file you want, the Blue Duo 206-05-24. Now this file is changing pretty rapidly because the developer is updating on a pretty regular basis, so it may be a little different version number by the time you get to this. So what you want to do is just download it. Okay, now since it's an APK file that's not available on the Play Store, you're going to have to find out how to cross-load a file to your Android device. Now there's several different ways of doing this, and probably the best thing to do is just look up for your device of how you cross-load files. Now the technique that I use is Dropbox. So what I do is I'll just drag the downloaded file into my Dropbox folder. Okay, and once that's uploaded to Dropbox, then it's very easy for me to go right to Dropbox on the Android device and install the file. The other thing you might need to do is that some Android devices may want to block you from installing that file, so you'll have to learn how to get past that. Some Android devices will just ask you if it's okay if you want to install this third-party file. Others you might have to go through a little bit more, but it can be done. The second thing you want to take a look at is the version of the UI firmware you have. Now what you want to do is go to the FDM-Duo folder and then go down to firmware releases and take a look at the current user interface firmware. Now this is the current version that was introduced back in April, so you'll need to be running this UI firmware for everything to work correctly. If you haven't ever updated your firmware, the good news is this is one of the easiest ones to do because you don't have to take the radio apart. Now rather than me sitting there trying to explain all this to you, the best thing to do if you've never downloaded the firmware is go through here and look at this firmware update PDF file, which will prompt you through the whole process. Okay, so here's the file, and if you look, this gives you all the instructions for updating the Elad FDM-Duo's firmware. So once we get that done, then we should be able to use the Blue Duo program. Okay, once you have everything connected and you have your FDM-Duo turned on and install the Blue Duo software on your tablet, all you have to do is just start the program, and if everything's okay, it'll connect immediately. And you see here that we have it going. We have a few CW signals here we can zoom in on, and then we can then use the bottom side to tune around a little bit. Change the modes. Turn off the on and off some of the features like noise reduction. So I think you'll find this a pretty handy little app to use along with your FDM-Duo because it really requires no other connections outside of the HC05 module connected to the radio. Neat. Okay, if you've got everything working right, this is what you should get when you're done. You should be able to just load the program, and it should immediately connect to the FDM-Duo, and now you can use your remote display. And by the way, there's no audio that's transferred in this right now, so it's mainly used when you want to have a standalone display when the radio is in standalone mode. Okay, thanks for watching.
Break federal rules using private email. The Secretary of State, Fox Radio Steve Taylor, is live in Washington.
An internal review by a State Department investigator concludes that Hillary Clinton disregarded cybersecurity guidelines when she used a private email account for messages that should have been sent and received using government systems.